Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever committed to learning a new language, you probably started with, the promise of simplicity. One perfect app, maybe, or one beautifully designed textbook, or that one audio course that's guaranteed to deliver fluency.
Right, the silver bullet idea.
Exactly. But if you've been on that journey for any length of time, you know the truth. Progress stalls. That single method starts to feel, inadequate.
You hit a wall.
You hit a wall that no single tool seems equipped to break down.
And that experience hitting the wall, that's precisely what the source material we received today is all about preventing.
Okay.
Our listener submitted this incredibly detailed blueprint for success, and we're calling it the multiple track attack.
Multiple track attack, I like it.
Yeah, it basically rejects that whole silver bullet idea. It argues that language acquisition, it needs a whole arsenal.
An arsenal, okay.
It acknowledges language isn't just one skill, it's complex, a tapestry of skills: reading, writing, listening, speaking, even grammar and pronunciation.
Right, all interconnected.
Exactly. And you need a carefully orchestrated symphony of tools, not just a solo instrument, if you want to effectively acquire them all, sort of simultaneously.
I love that framing, the symphony of tools, because it immediately tackles that feeling of frustration, of inadequacy. Why rely on just one approach when you can, purchase and use a whole variety of materials together? Textbooks, dictionaries, flashcards, audio courses, authentic materials.
The whole shebang.
Right. So our mission today is to synthesize the research that supports this anti-single method approach. We're looking for that precise synergy.
Magic combination.
Where these diverse tools actually reinforce each other.
Right.
So what you learn in one track, maybe reading,
pops up again when you're doing your flashcards.
Exactly. And it becomes instantly more memorable, leading to acquisition that's hopefully faster and, crucially, more permanent.
Okay, so to achieve that, we'll need to dive deep into the theory first. What underpins this attack? We'll start with the bedrock of modern research, the input versus output debate. Why you need both, but maybe not for the reasons you think.
Okay. That's interesting.
Then we'll methodically break down how to build your essential toolkit. We'll go beyond just listing things.
Right.
And talk about how to really leverage components like dictionaries, grammar books, and the non-negotiable spaced repetition systems.
SRS. Always crucial.
Always. And finally, we'll outline multi-track strategies for mastering specific skills, pronunciation, vocabulary, fluency. And critically, how do you integrate this aggressive yet modular learning schedule into the reality of a busy modern life?
That's the key question for most people, isn't it? Finding the time. Okay, let's unpack this, because the why is just as important as the how. Why is stacking methods actually better than just single-minded devotion to one? It starts, you said, with the theory.
It does. It starts with this fundamental theoretical distinction in how our adult brains process and internalize language. But the foundation of this whole deep dive really rests on the work of linguists like Stephen Krashen and Meryl Swain. They define these two independent ways adults develop language competence: acquisition and learning.
Acquisition and learning. Okay.
And this distinction, it's the core principle. It separates modern effective language methods from those traditional, often frustrating ones you remember from school.
Let's nail down that acquisition-learning distinction then. Acquisition.
Yeah.
That's the subconscious process, right?
Exactly.
Like how a kid picks up their first language, often without any explicit instruction. It results in this intuitive feel for correctness. You don't know the rule, maybe, but you just know the sentence sounds right. Or, more importantly, it sounds jarringly wrong.
Precisely. It's intuition. It's communicative competence.
Yeah.
If you asked a native speaker why they used a certain tense, they might actually struggle to articulate the rule.
Yeah, I've done that. They just say, it sounds better.
Right. But they'd know the alternative was incorrect. Learning, on the other hand, is that conscious process we're all familiar with from high school.
The drills, the table.
Memorizing explicit rules, endless conjugation tables, grammatical principles. This conscious knowledge acts as a sort of internal editor, which a Krashen called the monitor.
The monitor, okay. And the crucial finding there is that the monitor is very limited, isn't it?
Extremely limited.
You can only really deploy those consciously memorized rules when you meet three conditions. You need plenty of time.
Which you rarely have in conversation.
You have to be focused specifically on the form of the language, not the meaning.
also rare in real communication.
And you actually have to know the specific rule you need at that moment.
Right. And when you're in a fast-paced conversation, you basically have none of those conditions.
So the monitor fails.
It fails spectacularly.
Mm.
And since real communicative competence requires that instant intuitive response, relying solely on conscious learning is exactly why many students can ace a grammar test,
Get 100%.
but then completely freeze up when they try to order a coffee.
Been there.
Yeah. This failure led directly to the most important theoretical concept for our multiple track attack: comprehensible input, CI.
Comprehensible input. So the idea that reading and listening are the real engines of acquisition.
Precisely. The comprehensible input hypothesis states that we acquire language, fundamentally, by understanding messages that contain structure slightly beyond our current level.
That's the famous I plus Aguilar.
That's the I plus LR. Input that you understand, and that's just slightly challenging, is hypothesized to be both necessary and potentially sufficient for language acquisition.
Sufficient? Really?
Well, that's the strong claim, yes.
Yeah.
If you understand the meaning, the theory goes, your brain subconsciously figures out the structure over time.
Okay, but hold on. If I'm trying to hit that sweet spot, that I plus $1, how do I actually know if what I'm reading or listening to is precisely one step above my current level, my dollar? It
Yeah.
seems almost impossible to gauge perfectly.
That's a fantastic question. And it's why the source material really emphasizes that optimal input should be roughly tuned, not specifically tuned to $1+.
Roughly tuned, like in the ballpark.
Exactly. Imagine trying to tune an old radio dial to one single tiny point. It's frustrating, nearly impossible. Instead, you tune into a wider band. That's roughly tuned input.
Right.
If the learner understands the overall message, say 90% or more of a conversation or a text, the necessary $1+$1 will automatically be provided within that input stream.
So you don't have to hunt for it specifically.
Well, you don't have to hunt for it.
Yeah.
The sheer volume of exposure ensures those slightly more advanced structures, they just pop up repeatedly in a context you already understand.
Got it. So volume of slightly challenging but highly understood material, that's the accelerator for acquisition. But this brings us straight to the output challenge. If input is potentially sufficient for acquisition, for internalizing the rules subconsciously, why is it that people who, say, read novels and watch movies extensively in their target language, why do they still struggle so much with speaking and writing?
Right. The passive bilingual phenomenon.
Exactly. Why do they exist if input is enough?
This is the critical separation that the MTA is designed to address. Output speaking and writing, it's a separate skill. It requires separate practice.
Input versus output as distinct skills.
Comprehension is fundamentally a passive skill. Production is an active skill. Think of it like this. Knowing all the theory behind a perfect golf swing
Watching videos, reading books.
is completely different from actually being able to execute a consistent golf swing under pressure.
True. Very true.
The brain requires practice in the act of choosing the right words, organizing them coherently to express a specific thought. And that practice only comes through trying to produce output.
So the existence of these passive bilinguals who can understand maybe at native levels but just can't produce fluently, that really demonstrates it. Input is great for building competence, but production needs dedicated practice.
Absolutely. However, and this is important, while output practice doesn't directly cause acquisition itself, it contributes indirectly in two really vital ways. First, when you try to speak or write, you inevitably elicit feedback.
Corrections,
clarifications, conversational responses from others, all of which serve as more comprehensible input, but it's input specifically targeted at the weaknesses you just exposed by trying to speak.
Personalized input based on your errors.
Exactly. And the second way output helps, which is often overlooked, is its impact on the affective filter.
Right, you mentioned that. We should probably define that clearly.
The affective filter. It's essentially a psychological barrier. Think of factors like high stress, low self-confidence, lack of motivation, or just plain anxiety.
Performance anxiety.
Yeah. All these things can prevent input, even perfectly comprehensible input, from actually reaching the language acquisition device in your brain.
So you could be hearing it, but it's not getting in.
It just bounces off. If you're terrified of making a mistake when you speak, your brain effectively shuts down the acquisition process. But engaging in output, even if it's clumsy or full of errors,
Pushing through the fears.
it lowers that filter dramatically.
Yeah.
Why? Because of personal involvement. When you are personally invested in communicating your thought, your story, your question,
Hmm.
you become deeply motivated to understand the response you get, and you're much more likely to remember the correct way to say it next time. The input you receive just sticks far better when that filter is down.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So the multiple track attack isn't just about having like 10 books piled on your desk.
No, not at all.
It's actually a resolution to this whole input-output debate. You flood your system with acquisition-focused input reading tracks, audio tracks, to drive that overall competence and vocabulary.
Build the foundation.
And then you use skill-specific output tracks, speaking practice, writing practice, even creative flashcards to develop fluency, production speed, and crucially, to keep your affective filter low and hungry for that targeted input you mentioned.
That synthesis is absolutely the key takeaway for this section. The sources we looked at highlight that a truly well-balanced learning program should focus on 4 balanced strands.
4 strands. Okay, what are they?
Meaning focused input, meaning focused output, fluency development, and deliberate learning.
Deliberate learning, like grammar rules.
Like grammar rules, vocabulary drills, pronunciation exercises, the conscious stuff.
Okay, and here's the constraint that I suspect analytic, rule-driven learners like me might initially struggle with. The deliberate learning part, the conscious study of grammar and rules. The sources say it should make up less than 1/4 of your total time.
Less than 25%. That is often the hardest pill to swallow for many learners.
Especially if you come from a traditional schooling background, where grammar was everything.
Exactly. But think about it. If you spend 75% or more of your time on meaning-focused input and meaning-focused output, you are maximizing the time spent engaging in actual communication or preparing for it.
Which is the point, presumably.
Right. The brain acquires structure far more efficiently through understanding messages in context, through reading and listening, than through consciously memorizing rules out of context.
Yeah.
Deliberate learning is important. It's the seasoning, perhaps.
Not the main course.
Not the main course. It helps us monitor our output when we have time, check for errors, polish things. But it doesn't build the core communicative competency. The MTA succeeds because it prioritizes those 3 communicative strands, input, output, fluency, using multiple tools.
Okay, so since deliberate learning, the grammar stuff, needs to be minimized, we need a toolkit that makes our input really efficient and our output really effective. Let's tackle the necessary evil first. Grammar. If we're only spending maybe 1/4 of our time on it, how do we choose a textbook? And more importantly, how do we use it without letting it, as the source material colorfully puts it, anesthetize us against progress?
Haha, yeah, that's a good line. The goal is to minimize the grammar grind and maximize the fun, the engagement.
Okay.
Your textbook track is really for grounding, but definitely not for dwelling. Find a basic textbook, sure, but understand its role. And the role is not to teach you the language page by page.
So what is its role?
Its role is to serve as a resource library, a reference. You use it primarily as a source of simple, reliable example sentences and maybe some basic dialogues.
Not as a curriculum you have to slog through from chapter 1 to chapter 20.
Absolutely not. Don't let it dictate your pace or depress you with complexity you're not ready for.
Okay, so the textbook is a reference guide, not a dictator. I like that. But how do we extract the maximum value from those example sentences it provides without spending hours just reading the dense explanations? This is where that creative game comes in, right?
Yes. The creative game is the active application of the MTA philosophy to grammar. Instead of passively waiting for the book to formally explain, say, the complex future subjunctive tense on page 250.
Which sounds terrifying.
Right. You look at the simpler example sentences it provides in earlier sections, the ones you do understand, and you proactively manipulate them.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, let's say the book gives you a simple sentence. The dog walks to the big city. You immediately ask yourself, how do I change the noun?
The cat walks to the big city. Or the man walks.
Perfect. How do I change the adjective? The dog walks to the small city. How do I make it plural? The dogs walk. How do I change the verb tense?
The dog walked to the big city. The dog will walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are essentially running a race with the grammar book. You're trying to master the concept through hands-on manipulation and experimentation before the book formally explains the underlying rule, maybe 50 pages later.
Ah, I see. You're reverse engineering the grammar from the examples.
You're breaking the example sentences down into new words, new word forms, new word orders. This proactive, hands-on analysis, combined with immediate application, saying the new sentences aloud, maybe even writing them down, transforms passive reading into active, meaning-focused output practice.
So you're using the textbooks examples as scaffolding.
Precisely. You maximize the mileage you get from every single sentence, and by the time the book finally gets around to explaining the rule, your brain has often already started to subconsciously internalize it through this acquisition-driven manipulation. The formal explanation then just confirms what you've already started to figure out.
That sounds much more engaging than just reading rules.
Oh, okay.
Next up in the toolkit, the dictionary and phrasebook track. This seems straightforward, but the source material was quite specific about quality here.
Yes, a dictionary is absolutely foundational, but it must be robust. It needs to be two-way, obviously English to target language and target language back to English. But it also needs to be substantial. The big warning in the sources is against those infuriatingly inadequate little pocket dictionaries.
We've all bought them for trips.
And they're fine for basic survival, maybe.
Yeah.
But if your plan within the MTA framework is to eventually read native materials, newspapers, articles, even complex fiction, you need a dictionary that includes sophisticated vocabulary.
Like what?
Words like negotiate, proprietor, multilateral, constitutional, the kind of words you actually encounter in news columns or more serious writing.
Why is it so crucial to have those more complex words accessible early on?
Because the MTA requires you to connect your different learning tracks to the real world as soon as possible. If one of your goals is reading a newspaper column, you will hit words like proprietor or negotiate almost immediately.
Right.
If your dictionary fails you right then and there, your reading track stalls. You get frustrated, your motivation dips, your affective filter goes up.
And you might just give up on reading that article.
Exactly. A good comprehensive dictionary ensures you can sustain that crucial extensive input practice without constant roadblocks. It keeps the momentum going.
Okay, makes sense. And what about phrase books? The source compared them to hummingbirds alongside the elephants of big dictionaries.
Yeah, don't dismiss the Simple Traveler's Phrasebook. They contain that essential survival vocabulary, ordering food, asking directions, basic greetings. They often have a handy mini dictionary section, too.
So they offer immediate practical value.
Huge immediate value. Honestly, mastering a decent phrasebook alone instantly elevates you from a complete beginner to at least an advanced beginner. It gives you immediate output capacity for basic situations, which is hugely motivating.
Okay, now for what you call the non-negotiable, the MVP of the toolkit. Spaced repetition systems, SRS, and flashcards. This is where we maximize that deliberate learning time, that maybe 25%.
Absolutely. SRS technology, whether you're using a digital platform like Anki or Memrise, or even a physical system like a Lightner box.
The old index card system.
Right. It is single-handedly the most effective weapon we have against forgetting. Why? Because it perfectly leverages the psychology of memory decay.
The forgetting curve.
Exactly. SRS schedules your review of a piece of information at the optimal moment, just before your brain is about to naturally let it fade away entirely.
So it interrupts the forgetting process right at the critical point.
Precisely. It finds that perfect balance between the advantages of nearly forgetting something, which forces your brain to work harder to retrieve it, strengthening the memory, and the disadvantages of actually forgetting it completely, which means you have to relearn it. This maximizes retention efficiency.
You mentioned an interesting optimization rule in the sources about timing those reviews, something about predicting the test date.
Yeah, it's a fascinating finding from memory research. For maximum long-term retention, say for a test or a trip that's 6 months away, the optimal time delay for the first review of new information is around 10 to 20% of that final goal interval.
Okay, let's make that practical. If my trip is in, say, 100 days.
Then the ideal time to review a new word or phrase for the first time after learning it is somewhere between 10 and 20 days later.
And the SRS software handles all that complex scheduling automatically.
That's the beauty of it. The software calculates these expanding intervals for every single card in your deck, ensuring you see each item precisely when your brain is starting to get hazy on it, forcing the memory to be reconsolidated and strengthened exponentially.
That efficiency is why the MTA relies so heavily on SRS for vocabulary and maybe even grammar points.
It's the engine for maintaining and expanding that knowledge base efficiently.
But here is the non-negotiable principle you stressed earlier, and the sources hammer this home. Do not just use pre-made flashcard decks you download from the internet.
Absolutely critical. Don't do it.
If SRS is so efficient, why not just grab a perfect 5,000-word deck someone else made? It seems faster.
It seems faster, but it turns the process back into passive consumption. It's like trying to learn from Rosetta Stone by just clicking pictures. The real power of SRS, the deep learning, comes from the act of creation.
Creating the cards yourself.
Yes. When you build the deck yourself, when you choose the words that are relevant to you, when you find your own images, when you write your own personalized example sentences that connect to your life, when you forge that personal connection,
You're processing it much more deeply.
you are bypassing the brain's natural filters that try to discard information it deems irrelevant or impersonal. You are actively forcing the information to have meaning, context, and relevance in your life. Pre-made cards lack that crucial personal hook.
And so they're learned superficially.
Often, yes, learned quickly perhaps, but forgotten just as fast because there's no deep encoding. The act of making the card is a significant learning event in itself, maybe even more important than the first review.
Makes perfect sense. The learning starts way before the actual spaced review schedule kicks in.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, within the SRS context, the distinction between recall and review, this was highlighted as crucial.
Huge difference. You absolutely must prioritize practicing recall over mere studying or reviewing.
What's the difference in practice?
When you are passively studying a list, maybe reading the target word on one side and then flipping to see the translation, you are primarily strengthening your reading comprehension of that word. You see it, you recognize it.
Okay.
But if you want to get better at producing the word when you need it in conversation, or recalling its meaning instantly when you hear it, you must practice the act of retrieving it from memory without seeing the answer first. That's recall. That's testing yourself.
So seeing the prompt and trying to dredge up the answer from your own brain.
Exactly. Covering the answer, trying to produce it, then checking.
And the return on investment for recall practice versus passive studying is significant.
It's monumental. Studies consistently show that even 5 minutes spent actively testing yourself, practicing recall, is worth something like 25 minutes of just passively studying or rereading a list.
Wow, 5 times more effective.
At least. This incredible efficiency is what allows the MTA to actually work, even if you have a busy schedule. You prioritize the highest impact activity, testing yourself on your own personalized, self-created flashcards during those little pockets of free time you find throughout the day.
All right, so we've built our toolkit textbook as a reference, robust dictionary, personalized SRS deck, maybe a phrase book. We understand the theory input for acquisition, output for skill, keep the effective filter low. Now let's move into the specific tracks for mastering the actual skills. And we need to start with perhaps the most foundational element, but one that people often neglect or get wrong. Sound. Pronunciation.
Absolutely foundational.
We know our brains tend to filter out foreign sounds that don't exist in our native language. This creates what the sources call broken words. Can you explain that again?
Yeah, broken words are a really common frustration. These are words you know perfectly well when you see them written down.
You could define them, use them in a written sentence.
Exactly. But when you hear a native speaker say that exact same word in a conversation, you don't recognize it at all.
It sounds like noise.
It sounds like noise. This happens because your brain, early in life, learned to categorize sounds based on your native language and essentially ignore subtle acoustic differences that weren't meaningful in that language.
Give me an example.
The classic one is the difference between the R sound and the L sound for a native Japanese speaker learning English. Or the distinction between the single-tapped R and the trilled R in Spanish, like perro meaning butt versus perro meaning dog.
If your brain doesn't distinguish those sounds, the words sound identical.
They sound identical, or the foreign sound just gets misheard as the closest native equivalent. This prevents you from matching the spoken form to the written form you already know, hence a broken word.
So how do we actively rewire our brain's acoustic filtering system on this pronunciation track?
The essential technique, the starting point, is rigorous, focused listening practice with minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs. What are those?
Minimal pairs are pairs of words in the target language that differ by only a single sound, usually the sound that's difficult for you. Like in English, maybe ship and sheep for the vowel sound, or very and berry for the initial consonant.
Okay.
You listen to recordings of these pairs again and again and actively test yourself. Can I reliably hear the difference? Which word was said? Over time, this forces your brain to stop ignoring the subtle acoustic cue and create a new phonemic category for that foreign sound.
So you're training your ear to notice the distinction it previously ignored.
You're literally retraining your auditory cortex to perceive the soundscape of the new language accurately.
Okay, that's for perception, for hearing correctly. What about production? For actually making the sounds correctly with our own mouth. We need the IPA decoder for that, right?
We absolutely do. Relying on vague English-based approximations like trying to pronounce the French nasal vowel in bon, by just saying the English word bon will put a hard ceiling on your pronunciation quality forever.
It sounds foreign, but not French.
Exactly. The International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA, is the crucial tool here. It's a universal system where each symbol corresponds to one specific sound, and importantly, often comes with descriptions of how to make that sound tongue position, lip shape, airflow.
So it moves pronunciation from guesswork to, like, engineering.
Precisely. You move from try to make it sound like this recording to place your tongue here around your lips like this and let air flow through your nose. It gives you conscious control over the mechanics of sound production.
And for those notoriously difficult new sounds, especially vowels that just don't exist in English, like maybe the French U sound in tu or the German umlaut U, there was a specific technique mentioned that combines familiar sounds.
Yes, it's a fantastic muscle memory trick, particularly for vowels. Let's take that French U sound. It doesn't exist in English.
Right.
To create it consciously, the sources suggest you start by forming the tongue position for a familiar, easy English vowel, like the high front E sound in the word see. Keep your tongue there.
Okay, tongue in E position.
But now, maintain that tongue position while changing your lip shape to the shape you use for another familiar English sound, the rounded ooh sound in the word boo.
So E tongue, ooh lips.
Yeah.
Tries making the sound.
Ugh.
It feels weird, but it's different.
It feels weird because it is a new combination for your mouth, but that combination forces your tongue and lips into the correct configuration for the French U. This conscious, engineered manipulation, guided by the IPA description, makes the sound instantly repeatable.
And once you can repeat it consciously,
It becomes much easier to practice and eventually store permanently in your muscle memory. It demystifies the sound and replaces guesswork with concrete mechanics.
okay, that's powerful for pronunciation. Moving to track 2, vocabulary acquisition. If we're creating our own flashcards using SRS, what kinds of words should we focus on initially to build a solid foundation quickly? We can't learn everything at once.
No, you need a strategic starting point. The source material strongly suggests focusing initially on a foundational, highly concrete vocabulary list. They mention a specific list of about 625 words.
Why 625? What's special about them?
They are selected because they are extremely practical, high frequency across many situations, and crucially very easy to visualize. Think basic nouns, verbs, adjectives. Dog, school, car, city, house, big, small, eat, drink, walk.
The building blocks.
Exactly. These are the high-frequency bricks. Because they're easy to picture in your mind, they're much easier to link to meaning directly without relying on English translation. You build this solid, visualizable foundation before you start worrying about abstract philosophical terms or complex grammatical connectors.
Yeah, makes sense. Start concrete. And the key to making these words stick, to ensuring good retention using our SRS, is making the flashcards multisensory, right? Using technology like Google Images.
Absolutely. You need to forge a deep, multisensory memory trace for each word. A good flashcard should ideally combine 4 ingredients: the written form, spelling; the spoken form, native audio; the meaning, visual representation; and ideally a personal connection.
So how does Google Images help with that?
Instead of putting the English translation on the answer side of your flashcard, you put a vivid, relevant picture you found through Google Images.
Ah, link the foreign word directly to an image, not to English.
Precisely. If the word is perro, dog, in Spanish, you find a picture of a dog, maybe even your dog for that personal connection, and that picture becomes the meaning. Then you add native speaker audio of the word perro. Now, when you review, you see the spelling perro, you hear the sound, you recall the image of the dog, maybe your dog.
That sounds much richer than just Perro dog.
It creates a much stronger, more direct, and more permanent neural connection, bypassing the English middlemen.
Okay, this image technique works great for concrete, visualizable words like dog or car. But what about more abstract concepts or grammatical information like noun genders in languages like German or French? That seems harder to visualize.
It is, and that's where we need a different tool from our mnemonic toolkit, the mnemonic imagery game. This involves using vivid, memorable, often completely nonsensical or even shocking mental imagery.
Like memory palaces.
Sort of, but maybe simpler for this specific purpose. For abstract or inherently nonsensical grammatical categories like gender, you can use a simplified version of the person-action-object PAO system, often used by memory athletes.
Okay, how would that work for, say, German noun genders? There are 3. Masculine, feminine, neuter.
Right. You could assign a vivid mental anchor to each gender. For example, all masculine nouns might be mentally associated with a famous, distinctly masculine figure, Sources use Arnold Schwarzenegger as an example.
Okay, Arnold masculine,
All feminine nouns might be associated with a famous woman, maybe Beyoncé.
Beyoncé feminine.
And all neuter nouns could be associated with something inanimate but memorable, perhaps something abstract or explosive like a nuclear explosion.
Nuclear explosion, neuter, got it. A bit weird but memorable.
Exactly. Then you can even layer in an action performed by that person or thing to remember other grammatical features, like the plural form.
Okay, let's try it. Suppose I need to remember that the German word for dog, which is Hund, is masculine. And let's say, hypothetically, its plural form is just Hunde, adding an E. How would I use Arnold?
You need to pre-assign an action to represent that E plural ending. Let's say your action for E plurals is eating.
Eating, okay.
So, to remember, der Hund, masculine, becomes die Hunde, plural E. You create a vivid mental image of Arnold Schwarzenegger eating the dog.
Slightly disturbed. Arnold eating a dog. Okay, that's memorable. I won't forget that easily.
It's bizarre, maybe slightly violent, but it sticks. Because Arnold represents masculine, and the action eating represents the E plural. If another masculine word, say tisch, table, had a different plural, maybe no ending, Arnold might be doing a different pre-assigned action, like hugging the table.
So the weirder and more vivid the image, the better.
Generally, yes. The brain is wired to pay attention to and remember things that are unusual, emotional, or survival relevant, even if simulated. This technique replaces tedious, abstract drilling of gender and plural lists with a memorable, albeit strange, little story for each word.
Okay, I can see how that would work. Moving to track 3. Fluency through extensive input. Specifically focusing now on reading and audio. If acquisition is primarily driven by comprehensible input, we need an efficient way to consume vast quantities of material.
That's the core idea. Extensive reading, which just means reading large quantities of material that you find enjoyable and relatively easy, is arguably the simplest and most effective way to grow your passive vocabulary and subconsciously internalize grammatical patterns.
But the key is relatively easy. How easy does it need to be? The source material had a specific guideline, didn't it?
Yes, a very useful rule of thumb. For reading material to be effective for acquisition, it should contain no more than about 2 unfamiliar words per 100 running words.
2 out of 100, that sounds very easy.
It is easy. That translates to roughly 1 unknown word every 5 lines of text on average. If the material is much harder than that, you spend too much time stopping, looking things up in your dictionary.
Breaking the flow.
Breaking the flow, getting frustrated, and your acquisition rate just stalls. You're focusing on unknown words instead of absorbing the message.
Okay, finding material that's that easy, especially beyond the beginner stage, sounds challenging though. This is where the concept of narrow reading helps.
Narrow reading is a genius strategy to overcome that exact challenge. It means deliberately choosing to read a lot of material focused on just a single specific topic or genre that interests you.
Like what?
Maybe you read only articles about deep-sea exploration for a month, or only fan fiction based on a particular TV show you love, or only book reviews in your target language.
How does sticking to one narrow topic help keep the difficulty down?
By sticking to one content area, you drastically reduce the total number of different words, the vocabulary diversity you encounter. You'll see the same specialized vocabulary related to that topic, like submarine, trench, pressure, abyss if you're reading about the deep sea, repeated again and again in slightly different contexts.
Ah, so you learn the topic-specific words quickly through repetition.
Exactly. And this familiarity builds your content knowledge about the topic itself, which makes it exponentially easier to guess the meaning of the few new unknown words that do pop up from the context. It helps you maintain that optimal low difficulty rate, that 1 or 2 unknown words per 100.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for managing reading difficulty. Now, here's where the MTA really starts to layer the tools. Audiobook integration. This seems like a powerful way to merge the input stream.
Oh, it's invaluable. Reading a text while simultaneously listening to a well-narrated audiobook version of it, that's a massive accelerator for the acquisition device.
Why is it so much better than just reading silently or just listening?
Well, think about it. When you read silently, especially in a foreign language, you might be skipping over tricky grammatical structures without fully processing them. Or worse, you might be mentally mispronouncing words in your head, reinforcing bad habits.
Right. Internal monologue pronunciation errors.
Yeah. When you listen while reading, the audio forces you to process the language at a native-like speed. It automatically corrects your internal pronunciation. It clarifies ambiguities and meaning because you hear the intonation and emphasis. You naturally absorb the rhythm and flow of the language.
So the two tracks, reading and listening, directly reinforce each other in real time.
Perfectly. The text makes the audio more comprehensible because you can see the words, and the audio makes the text come alive, improving pronunciation, listening skill, vocabulary, and grammar absorption all at once. It's pure synergy.
Okay, that sounds great for books. But what about more advanced, faster media like movies or TV shows? Just turning on the subtitles in the target language and hitting play. That often feels overwhelming. The input isn't very comprehensible.
You're absolutely right. Native speed audiovisual media is often too dense, too fast, and lacks clear visual context for a lot of the language being used. This is where a strategy called movie talk comes in, demonstrating how to make even complex native content more useful for acquisition.
Movie talk. How does that work?
Movie talk was developed by Ashley Hastings. The core idea involves an instructor, or you could even do this yourself, self-narrating, playing the visual track of a movie or show with the sound muted.
Muted.
And then the instructor, or you, provides a simplified narration and dialogue over the visuals, describing what's happening, what characters might be saying, but using language that is deliberately controlled to be comprehensible to the learner. The key is linking the language directly to the visible actions and context on screen.
So you're creating a layer of comprehensible input on top of the authentic visual material.
Exactly. And the research comparing this to just watching the original movie is staggering. Let's revisit those statistics from the sources because they really prove the point about prioritizing comprehensibility.
Okay, what did the research find?
The research analyzed 1-minute samples of films. When learners just watch the original film with the original audio, they could typically understand, on average, only about 2.1 words per minute that had a clear, visible referent.
Meaning words they could directly link to something they were seeing on screen.
Precisely. The vast majority of the language dialogue narration was too abstract, too fast, or the context wasn't clear enough visually to make it comprehensible input just from watching.
Only about 2 words a minute linked to visuals? That's
Yeah.
very low.
Incredibly low. But when the same visual clip was used with the movie talk technique,
With this simplified, context-linked narration.
the average number of words per minute that had clear, visible reference jumped to an astonishing 18.5.
Wow. From 2.1 to 18.5, that's nearly a 9-fold increase.
Almost 9 times more potentially acquirable vocabulary instructions delivered in the same 1-minute time frame, simply by controlling the input to maximize its comprehensibility and link it to the visuals.
That really underscores the principle. Comprehensibility trumps raw authenticity, especially in the earlier stages.
It absolutely confirms that the MTA philosophy must be about maximizing comprehensible input in every single track, even when you start engaging with complex native media. And a related tip here. Before you even attempt movie talk or watching a film, try reading a plot summary first, preferably in the target language.
Where would you find that?
Wikipedia is often a fantastic resource. Find the movie's plot summary on the target language version of Wikipedia. Reading that first builds crucial context-specific vocabulary and preloads your brain with the storyline.
So when you watch, even if you don't understand every word, you know generally what's happening.
Exactly. It provides scaffolding, making the subsequent viewing experience much more comprehensible and therefore more beneficial for acquisition.
Okay, this multiple track attack framework is clearly powerful. You've got synergistic tools, targeted strategies for skills, but let's be honest, it also sounds potentially overwhelming.
It can seem that way initially, yes.
The ultimate challenge for our listener, and for anyone trying this, is actually integrating all these different tracks and tools, the textbook referencing, the dictionary lookups, the SRS reviews, the extensive reading, the narrow reading, the audiobooks, the output practice, into an already packed, busy life. How on earth do we find the time?
This is where we have to be brutally honest about our time management, or lack thereof. The source material makes a provocative claim. Almost all of us spill enough minutes throughout the day, minutes that are currently wasted.
Like lost time.
Lost time, exactly.
Yeah.
We spill enough of those minutes daily that, if captured and used effectively, could be enough to learn a new language every single year.
Wow. That's a bold claim. Learn a language a year in spilled minutes.
It sounds like hyperbole, but think about it. We need to learn to mobilize those precious scraps of time, as the source calls them, those little 15-second gaps, 30 seconds, maybe a minute or two.
When you're waiting in line at the grocery store.
Exactly. Waiting for an elevator, waiting for the microwave, pumping gas, waiting for a web page to load. These are the hidden moments.
And the key is having a tool ready to deploy instantly in those tiny windows.
Precisely. And there's really only one tool in our MTA toolkit that is perfectly suited for those microbursts of activity.
It has to be the spaced repetition system, the flashcards.
It has to be the SRS. It becomes the linguistic growth protein, the glue that holds the whole system together and makes progress possible even when you don't have long, dedicated study blocks.
Because an SRS review session can be super short.
It's designed for microlearning. You only need a few seconds to look at a prompt, try to recall the answer, check if you were right, and swipe to the next card. Maybe you only get through 3 cards while waiting for the elevator.
But that's 3 productive touches instead of 0.
Exactly. The key is having your SRS configured for immediate access. Maybe the app icon is right there on your phone's home screen, no digging required. You train yourself. Moment of downtime, quick SRS review, you turn passive waiting into active vocabulary strengthening. Accumulate enough of those microsessions, and it makes a huge difference over time.
Okay, mobilizing hidden moments for SRS is crucial. Now let's talk about that other vital component of the MTA, the output practice. Speaking and writing. We established earlier that the goal of input is acquisition, internalizing the language. But the goal of output practice, surprisingly, you said, is actually to make mistakes.
That is the essential mindset shift required for the output track to be effective. You don't primarily speak or write to show off how much you know. You speak or write to discover what you don't know.
To locate the gaps in your knowledge.
Exactly. To locate your weaknesses and, crucially, to force the system, whether that's a conversation partner, a tutor, or even a feedback tool, to give you targeted corrective input right where you need it most.
So how should this look in practice? For writing, for example.
Your writing practice should ideally focus on articulating your own thoughts and ideas. Keep a diary in the project language. Try writing an email to an imaginary friend. Maybe attempt a short summary of an article you read.
Personal and meaningful content again.
Yes. And when you inevitably hit a word or a grammatical structure you need but don't know how to say, this is where a tool like Google Translate can be used strategically.
Ah, okay. How so? Not just typing in whole sentences.
Definitely not. Use it only as a quick dictionary to bridge that one specific vocabulary gap, or find that one tricky conjugation you're stuck on. Get the word or phrase you need to complete your thought.
And then what? Just trust Google Translate was right.
No. The crucial next step is to take that piece of writing, which now contains your intended meaning but likely still has errors, and immediately seek correction from a native speaker.
Okay, but finding native speakers for correction sounds like it could be difficult or expensive.
What?
How do you access affordable, targeted correction efficiently?
This is where the modern language learning ecosystem makes the MTA incredibly feasible in a way it wasn't even 15 years ago. Platforms like italki, Verbling, Preply, there are many now.
Online tutoring platforms.
Yes. They connect you with tutors and language partners from all over the world, often for very low hourly rates. You can specifically hire someone for just 30 minutes simply to read through that diary entry you wrote and correct your mistakes.
Ah, focused correction sessions.
And think about how powerful that feedback is. When a native speaker corrects a mistake in a sentence you constructed to express your own thought,
Something you actually wanted to say.
that targeted, personalized correction is exponentially more memorable and more effective for acquisition than doing some generic fill-in-the-blank grammar drill from a textbook about topics you don't care about.
Because it's relevant and addresses a communication need you just experienced.
Exactly. Your effective filter is down, you're motivated, the input sticks.
Okay, that makes sense for writing.
Yep.
What about actual speaking practice, real-time conversation? The sources pointed out that American learners, in particular, might have a cultural advantage here we should leverage aggressively.
Yes, the American extrovert advantage, let's call it. Now, this is a generalization, of course, but culturally, in many parts of the world, people can be quite reserved or acutely embarrassed about speaking a language they don't feel they know perfectly.
Fear of losing face, maybe?
Perhaps. Americans, on the other hand, again generalizing, tend to be a bit more gregarious, often more willing to jump in and try, even if they know they're going to make mistakes and sound, well, bad.
Less fear of imperfection, maybe?
Possibly. We need to exploit this cultural tendency, this willingness, even enjoyment of just talking and trying. We should use it to maximize our conversational learning moments.
How? What does that look like in practice?
It means not being shy, actively asking conversation partners for words you're missing. How do you say? Asking for clarification when you don't understand. What does that word mean? Crucially, explicitly requesting correction. Please tell me if I make mistakes.
Turn every conversation into a learning opportunity.
Exactly. Don't just try to survive the conversation. Try to actively extract learning from it. Platforms like Verbling, with its sort of speed dating style of short conversation exchanges with different partners, can be great for this kind of low pressure, high interaction output practice, maximizing your chances to elicit that valuable corrective input.
Okay, so be bold, ask for help, make mistakes count. Finally, sustaining this whole multiple track attack over the long haul. It requires more than just tools and techniques. It requires a specific mindset and a solid motivational strategy.
Absolutely. This is perhaps the most important piece. We have to internalize the fact that success in language learning is overwhelmingly determined by perseverance, diligence, and motivation. It is not primarily about some innate mystical talent for languages.
So it's more about grit than genius.
Much more. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And like any long-term project, it feels overwhelming if you only look at the distant finish line fluency. You have to break it down.
What are the best ways to break it down effectively and, just as importantly, track progress to stay motivated?
Focus on simple, concrete, trackable, short-term process goals rather than distant outcome goals. Things like read for 20 minutes every day, complete my daily SRS flashcard review no matter what, write one paragraph in my target language diary and get it corrected each week. Aim to learn, say, 20 new words or phrases per week via my flashcards.
Measurable, achievable steps.
Exactly. And then track them. Keep a simple log. Seeing that checklist fill up, seeing the streak continue, provides powerful, positive reinforcement and makes the progress feel tangible, even when fluency still feels far away.
And celebrate the small wins along the way.
Definitely. Remember that anecdote from the sources? Be content with partial victories. Like this student who is absolutely delighted because he managed to speak Swedish well enough to convince a Norwegian person that he was actually Finnish.
Not quite Swedish, but definitely not English.
Right. That's a partial victory. It shows progress, it's funny, and it provides a moment of deep satisfaction that fuels your motivation for the next week's effort. Don't wait for perfection to feel good about your progress. And perhaps the final psychological shift needed to really make the MTA work is how we view grammatical difficulty, those really tough concepts.
The fortresses of resistance.
Exactly. When you encounter a stubborn fortress of grammatical resistance, maybe it's German cases or Russian verbs of motion or French subjunctive, the goal within the MTA framework is not immediate, frustrating conquest. You don't have to bash your head against it until you understand it perfectly right now.
So what's the goal then?
The goal is to keep chipping away at it from multiple angles, using your different tracks. You encounter it in your reading input. You try to use it maybe incorrectly in your writing and get corrected output. You put specific tricky examples onto targeted SRS cards, deliberate learning. You return to it again and again. The initial goal is just to move that concept from being a complete, utter mystery
Where you have no clue.
to being merely confusing.
It's just confusing. That's the goal.
That's a huge step forward. Confusing means you've started to build some mental hooks. You recognize something is going on, even if you don't fully grasp it yet. It's through this continuous multi-track encroachment that real clarity eventually, often suddenly, arrives. But in the meantime, while that one fortress is still confusing, you're speeding ahead in overall fluency and vocabulary growth via all your other active tracks. You don't let one hard point halt all progress. #tag outro. So if we were to synthesize this entire deep dive, I think the real power of the multiple track attack lies in that relentless momentum. The momentum created by the synergy between all your different tools and activities.
It's the cycle.
It's the seamless, self-correcting cycle, where your acquisition-focused input, your reading, your listening, your optimized media consumption constantly feeds and supports your skill-specific output practice, your speaking, your creative flashcard making, your targeted writing for correction.
Each part helps the other parts work better.
Exactly. By ensuring that what you encounter in one resource genuinely reinforces what you're learning or practicing in another, you prevent those dreaded plateaus. You ensure that every precious scrap of time you manage to invest actually contributes to building both that subconscious linguistic competence and your conscious ability to produce the language fluently.
It really makes me think of the story of the famous polyglot Dr. Kato Lam. She learned something like 16 languages, many of them quite difficult.
An inspiration.
And she came to language learning relatively late in life, apparently in her 30s and 40s. But she always maintained that her study was never, ever a burden. She described it as an inexhaustible source of joy.
That's the ideal state, isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe this NTA approach, by making the process more engaging, more varied, and ultimately more successful, helps move language learning away from feeling like a tedious chore
Like homework.
and transforms it more into an intellectual sport or a fascinating puzzle, something that maximizes curiosity and genuinely minimizes that feeling of frustration and inadequacy.
Well said. And if we can accept that even a language often perceived as incredibly difficult, like, say, Chinese, can ultimately be tackled systematically by focusing on mastering its fundamental building blocks, its 214 radicals,
Breaking it down.
breaking it down. And if fluency itself is really nothing more than a process of continuous systemic encroachment into the unknown territory of a language, pushing the boundaries bit by bit.
Then the final question for you, the listener, is this. What fortress of linguistic resistance, that corner of grammar, that skill gap, that language goal that seems absolutely impossible to you right now, what part of it will you aim to make just merely confusing next week by adding just one more track, one more tool to your own personal language learning system? Start building your language symphony today.